Hello. With the surge of popularity and stories about rules, I came to realize that there's one from my own life that I feel ready to share. To give you an idea of who I am and why I do what I do for seemingly no gain, I'll provide you with some background. I'm a very lonely person that borders on being a hermit. I live on my own with no neighbors to speak of, no family, and no friends. With the advent of self-service machines in supermarkets and online agencies, I've lost the last source of human interaction. I'm fine with that. I am, however, superstitious, or even religious, you could say. I believe and know, as you'll soon understand, that there's more to the world than meets the eye. I know that there's some kind of afterlife and that there's something inside each and every one of us that's beyond biology. I like my solitary lifestyle, but I don't like the fact that I'm leaving nothing behind. I think it's intrinsic to every human being to want to leave behind a legacy, and that it's not as simple as the drive to reproduce and have children. It's spiritual. It comes from somewhere else. Every year, people travel en masse to graveyards to light candles in remembrance for their late loved ones, but by the end of the night, so many graves remain unlit and forgotten. I know that is my fate, and so I shouldered the mantle of the Good Samaritan of All Saints' Day. It will be my legacy, not to the people I leave behind, but to the forsaken that came before me. So why am I about to share these rules with you all after having kept it to myself for the entirety of my adult life? Well, my liver's in sharp decline, and I don't know how much longer I can carry on. It'd warm my heart knowing that when I'm finally forced to throw in the towel, someone else out there is ready to become the Good Samaritan in my stead. I'd feel good knowing that someone, someday, might tend to my unlit grave on All Saints' Day. It's a simple task that doesn't take much time nor money if you're on a budget. You only have to do it one night every year. And it doesn't matter who you are. Almost any healthy person can do it. If you follow these rules that I've worked out through many years of trial and error, you'll minimize the risks involved. First of all, go to any store that sells grave candles and a lighter if you don't have one. I usually go with an 8-pack, but there's no rule on how many graves you have to light. If you're feeling uncomfortable the first time, it might be better to start with less because you won't have a lot of time once you're inside the graveyard. You'll also need a knife that's at least moderately sharp, and a digital watch can be good but isn't mandatory. Also, make sure to be wearing shoes you're comfortable running in. No heels, please. On the night of All Saints' Day, make sure to be at the graveyard by 11:30 p.m. with all of your items. It will always be clear of all other visitors by this hour. That is unfortunately something I cannot explain, but it always is. If you arrive just a minute earlier, you might still see someone inside, but when it shifts over, they'll be gone. Do not enter before 11:30. Once you're in, you have 30 minutes to find the unlit graves and light your candles. If you've decided to bring 4, a good idea is to imagine the graveyard as 4 squares and place one in each so that everyone has a chance. If you cheapen out by lighting them to the 4 closest graves by the entrance, it defeats the entire point and proves you care more about yourself than the forgotten, in which case you don't deserve to be the Good Samaritan. Rule number 1. Don't bring cell phones or bikes into the graveyard. This is a common courtesy, no matter the day or your purpose. Leave them at home, or park the bike outside. Rule number 2. Don't bring a torch to light your way. You'll have to navigate and piece together the path by looking at the lit graves. If the graveyard has lampposts, never walk directly in the light. Some encounters are less likely to happen if you stay in the dark. Rule number 3. If you hear the approaching sound of a ringing handbell and footsteps, immediately trace where the sound's coming from and lower your head into a bow in that direction while standing still. A hunched, vaguely human-shaped figure carrying aforementioned bell will walk past you, politely bow its own head in return, and be on its way. This is by far one of the easiest encounters since It always announces itself clearly, and you'll know where it's coming from. The downside is that it wastes a lot of time with how slowly it walks. It's rare for the entity to show itself in well-lit conditions, but once I could make out something akin to a goat's skull where its head should be, it's okay to look, as long as your own head remains down. Rule number 4. This one is my favorite encounter that I actually miss every year it's not around. If you see a shapely female silhouette making its way towards you, quickly use the knife I told you to bring and slice a cut in your palm. Splash some blood on the ground and step back at least a couple of meters. You can walk away immediately and choose a different path after this, or just stand and watch. I like to spare a few seconds and do the latter. If the area is well lit enough to see her, you'll notice just how enchantingly beautiful she is. She'll stop by the tribute of blood, lap it up from the ground, and then turn and leave, paying you no heed. Make sure that you don't look at her when she leaves, because there's nothing there but a gnarled hole like a rotten, hollowed-out tree trunk. She won't react to you seeing it, but you'll be left feeling disorientation with a piercing headache, which is something you absolutely don't need right now. Rule number 5. Here comes the worst and most uncomfortable rule. If you hear the sound of crying children all around you, look all around until you spot movement in the shadows, and then run in the opposite direction as fast as humanly possible. You're safe once you can't hear their cries anymore. It will sound as if the whines come from every direction, so you have to rely on your eyesight to spot them before they reach you. If they do reach you, they'll try to climb on top of your back, and I don't know what happens if they make it that far, nor do I want to find out. Don't return to that part of the graveyard that year. Rule number 6. Moving, floating orbs of light are not normal. Think of them as anglerfish and stay away. Rule number 7. If you see groups of what appears to be people congregating underneath the light of a lamppost, choose a different path. I've never gotten close enough to get a good idea of what happens if you do, but remember that you're there on a mission and you want to avoid any and all obstacles that waste your time or worse. Nothing human except you stays at the graveyard past 11:30 p.m. on All Saints' Day. Rule number 8. Sometimes small creatures will run in front of your feet. They're harmless, and I thought they were rats until the night I accidentally stepped on one. It emitted a horrible, piercing shriek that attracted just about every entity in my direction. Don't repeat the same mistake, please. Rule number 9. Be out by 12. This is why it's good to bring a digital watch so you can keep track of time. You know All Saints' Day is over when you hear the sound of violins and laughter erupt all over the graveyard. This is the first rule I learned. When I was a kid, my grandmother told me that's when the hidden folks come out to feast on all the new corpses of people who have died. I always wondered what would happen if a year passed without any new corpses. Well, once you've fulfilled your duty and lit all your candles, just leave the graveyard as you normally would. Nothing follows you out, and you'll have an entire year's worth of rest before it's time to be a good Samaritan again. These 9 rules should help you out a fair bit on the way, but I'm sad to say that my memory isn't what it used to be, and I'm almost certain I've forgotten some. All precautions are so firmly ingrained into my mind that I carry them out by heart, but when pushed to write them down on a concise list, it becomes more difficult. No matter. If I was able to figure out all of this on my own, so should you. I'm waiting out the last few hours before I go out for this year's All Saints' Day myself. I hope I've inspired some of you to pick up the torch and carry it on for me. With how things have been going, this year may very well be my last act as the Good Samaritan of All Saints' Day. Good luck.